misty hills of Kentucky lies the abandoned site of Pleasant Hill, a Shaker community that vanished without a trace in 1834. Over 300 people disappeared overnight, leaving only empty buildings and a silence that still haunts the area. For nearly 2 centuries, Kentucky has kept the truth hidden in sealed records, but recently uncovered testimonies have revealed a terrifying reality. What happened at Pleasant Hill wasn't just a tragedy, but 27 years of terror disguised as devotion. It all began in 1807 during the Second Great Awakening, when the Richardson family established the community as a spiritual sanctuary. Led by Samuel Richardson, a man with commanding authority and deep Shaker knowledge, the family gained the trust of hundreds seeking religious purity. But behind their pious facade, the Richardsons were driven by greed and manipulation. Help me with a like and a subscribe to motivate me to make better videos, and don't forget to comment which country you are from. Samuel's wife Martha secretly maintained their marriage while controlling the community's social dynamics with her uncanny ability to read people's fears. The Richardson children, Ezekiel, Caleb, Rebecca, and Patience, each played a role in expanding the family's influence, turning Pleasant Hill from a religious haven into a thriving yet sinister operation. Ezekiel transformed the community's agriculture into a commercial empire, while Caleb oversaw surveillance of members. Rebecca managed the women's dormitories and used psychological tactics to break down and rebuild individuals, while Patience's expertise in forgery ensured the family's operations were concealed. The family's network extended to multiple profitable businesses, from furniture workshops to seed supplies, all of which masked darker activities. As they manipulated both their followers and the local authorities, the family maintained the illusion of a model community. But in 1834, the truth came to light. The Shaker community at Pleasant Hill had been destroyed, leaving only the family's empire behind. The truth, buried in archives, has remained inaccessible for years, but what is clear is that the Richardson family's reign of terror is a dark chapter in American history that still demands to be remembered. Outsiders saw no obvious signs of coercion, but the Richardson family had woven an intricate web of control over Pleasant Hill. Every aspect of life was monitored by family members who reported directly to Samuel and Martha. No decision, no matter how small, occurred without their approval. Members could not leave without an escort, and even brief trips to nearby Harrodsburg required justification. The community was isolated both geographically and psychologically, making resistance unthinkable. New converts underwent a 6-month indoctrination process led by Rebecca and Martha, where their identities were stripped away and rebuilt to align with the family's expectations. Daily routines, including early mornings, tightly regulated tasks, and worship services, reinforced this control, making questioning the family's authority seem like questioning God. The first crack in the facade appeared in February 1812, when Brother Thomas Whitman, a generous donor and longtime member, began asking uncomfortable questions about the community's finances. A successful merchant, Thomas had donated his wealth, helping the Richardson family expand their operations. But his business background made him keenly aware of discrepancies in the records. The reported profits from the seed and furniture businesses didn't add up, and membership numbers didn't match the community's consumption. At a public meeting, Thomas presented his concerns, pointing out the inconsistencies in the financial records. The room fell silent. Samuel and Martha remained calm, but their subtle body language revealed their unease. Thomas pressed on, revealing discrepancies in the seed business and the furniture workshop's employee numbers. Finally, he pointed out that the membership rolls didn't align with their food consumption. Mother Sarah Richardson intervened, gently chastising Thomas for his doubts, implying that his concerns were rooted in worldly thinking. Samuel echoed her sentiment, suggesting that Thomas's mind had been clouded by his former life. That evening, Thomas was found dead in his bed by Sister Rebecca, who announced it as a peaceful transition. The community's atmosphere shifted after Thomas's questions, and his death raised more suspicions, casting a shadow over Pleasant Hill's supposedly devout existence. Brother Thomas passed away peacefully, his last words an apology for allowing worldly doubts to cloud his spiritual vision. The community accepted this explanation without question, as questioning leadership was seen as questioning God's will. His funeral the next day served as a warning about the dangers of letting business concerns interfere with spiritual submission. However, Sister Mary Caldwell, who cleaned the dormitories, noticed unsettling details when she entered Thomas's room. The bitter almond smell, his blue fingernails, and white foam around his mouth, carefully wiped away by Sister Rebecca, hinted at foul play. As Brother Caleb Richardson collected and burned Thomas's personal papers, including his financial records, Samuel called it a cleansing ceremony to rid the space of worldly attachments. The Richardson family moved quickly to control the community's reaction, with Sister Martha leading prayer circles to create an atmosphere where questioning the leadership was equated with spiritual failure. Ezekiel organized work details to keep members busy, and Jeremiah led discussions on the dangers of challenging authority, using Thomas's death as a cautionary tale. Within a month, Thomas Whitman's existence was erased from the community. His belongings were redistributed, his work assignments reassigned, and his name removed from records. In the following years, a disturbing pattern emerged. Members who questioned finances, wanted to visit family, or showed signs of independence were labeled as experiencing a spiritual crisis requiring intervention. Brother Jeremiah developed the retreat system, where dissenters were sent to isolated cabins under constant surveillance designed to keep them apart from the community. Brother Caleb managed the logistics, identifying candidates for the retreats based on subtle signs of disloyalty. Those who asked too many questions or showed leadership potential were chosen, while Sister Hannah forged letters to explain their absence or deaths to families. Her forgeries were so convincing that relatives were left with the illusion of closure, preventing further inquiry into the disappearances. Brother Isaiah, through his seed business, provided a perfect cover for disposing of evidence. His trips to distant farms allowed him to bury bodies in remote locations, while conducting legitimate business, maintaining the family's reputation and control over the community. The Richardsons' methods became more sophisticated and ruthless, ensuring their reign of terror remained hidden for decades. Isaiah Richardson's reputation as a reliable and punctual businessman allowed him to carry out his darker work unnoticed. He developed relationships with isolated farmers who welcomed his visits, enabling him to identify remote burial sites for the bodies of those who had disappeared. Isaiah's modified seed wagons, which appeared to carry normal supplies, contained hidden compartments for these grisly cargoes. His trips, though often involving overnight stays, were never questioned by customers who saw them as part of his busy schedule. When authorities inquired about missing persons, Sister Patience Richardson's meticulous record-keeping provided the perfect cover. She maintained falsified medical histories, travel documents, and correspondence that made disappearances appear natural. Her documentation was so flawless that official inquiries were quickly dispelled. The psychological control the Richardson family exercised was perhaps more chilling than their physical crimes. They had created a system where questioning authority was synonymous with spiritual failure, and blind obedience was the ultimate virtue. The community's population remained at around 400, despite frequent disappearances through a system of what Brother Caleb called natural selection, removing anyone who posed a threat to their control while aggressively recruiting new converts. Sister Rebecca and Martha Richardson carefully screened new arrivals using psychological assessments disguised as spiritual counseling. Converts deemed dangerous were marked for early elimination, while valuable recruits underwent intense indoctrination. This process involved isolating new members from the outside world, subjecting them to alternating periods of attention and neglect, breaking their psychological defenses and making them desperate for approval from the family. By 1825, Pleasant Hill had become a well-oiled machine of exploitation. The family's operations were run with ruthless efficiency. Samuel Richardson remained the charismatic spiritual leader, attracting new converts and keeping current members focused on spiritual rewards. Martha had perfected the science of psychological manipulation, using her detailed profiles to break down resistance and rebuild personalities. The family's various businesses, Ezekiel's agricultural operation, Jeremiah's furniture workshops, and Isaiah's seed business, generated enormous profits. These profits, however, never appeared in the books, shown to the community as the labor was provided by psychologically coerced workers, many of whom were essentially enslaved under the guise of religious devotion. The most insidious operation, however, was the family's involvement in human trafficking. Isaiah used his travels to identify younger members with valuable skills or independent tendencies and sold them to buyers operating plantations and industrial facilities throughout the South and Midwest. Sister Rebecca played a key role in identifying potential trafficking victims. Through her psychological assessments, she categorized newcomers as long-term assets, potential victims for trafficking, or those who were to be eliminated. The family's network of exploitation had evolved from opportunistic crimes into a highly profitable and sophisticated enterprise. Rebecca's methods for controlling the community were a mix of spiritual guidance and systematic abuse, designed to forge trauma bonds between victims and their abusers. She studied genuine Shaker conversion experiences, then twisted these techniques to serve the Richardson family's criminal goals. Her sessions left converts psychologically dependent on her approval, stripping them of previous identities and relationships. The community's isolation, both geographical and psychological, became total. The Richardson family controlled all knowledge and interpretation, with members rarely encountering outsiders except during highly supervised trips. Even these were monitored, with every conversation watched for signs of disloyalty. The family had built powerful alliances with local authorities, including Sheriff William Morrison of Mercer County, who protected them in exchange for regular donations. This network extended to merchants, politicians, and religious leaders, making local officials reluctant to investigate any complaints or rumors. The Richardson family's control methods grew more elaborate over time. Samuel's worship services, while grounded in Shaker practices, subtly manipulated members, inducing altered states of consciousness where critical thinking became impossible. Evening confession sessions led by various family members identified potential dissenters and applied public pressure for conformity through shame and guilt. These sessions also gathered intelligence on private conversations, allowing the family to monitor threats to their control. Sister Rebecca specialized in extracting information about emotional relationships that could enable resistance, while Brother Caleb focused on practical concerns like escape plans. Sister Hannah monitored confessions for any mention of family members outside the community who might pose a risk. Meanwhile, Mother Sarah Richardson, despite her frailty, had emerged as the family's mastermind. With decades of experience in manipulation, she orchestrated complex operations and devised long-term strategies. Her influence extended to every facet of the family's activities, from expansion plans to the development of new psychological techniques. Under Sarah's leadership, the family transformed their criminal operations into a sustainable business. They created elaborate communication systems using coded language and maintained separate financial accounts for different ventures, with false identities available in case they needed to escape. But their success eventually drew attention from the legitimate Shaker leadership in Ohio. In late 1833, Elder Joseph Meckham, a respected leader and disciple of Mother Ann Lee, was sent to evaluate Pleasant Hill for potential inclusion in the formal alliance of Shaker communities. Meckham's deep knowledge of Shaker practices and community structure made him a formidable challenge for the Richardsons and the beginning of the end for their reign of terror. Elder Joseph Meckham's mission to evaluate Pleasant Hill posed a direct threat to the Richardson family's carefully constructed facade. His task was to verify whether the community truly adhered to authentic Shaker principles before recommending them for official recognition. Pleasant Hill had long been praised for its spiritual achievements and economic success, but now they faced an investigator whose knowledge and methods were far more rigorous than previous visitors. Samuel Richardson initially welcomed the evaluation, confident that his family's experience in manipulating inspections would allow them to deceive another religious leader. However, Meckham's first requests immediately raised alarm. Unlike past visitors, he insisted on reviewing financial records dating back to 1807 and demanded private interviews with randomly selected members without any family supervision. Most troubling, he arrived with his own accounting ledgers ready to reconcile the community's membership numbers with consumption records, work output, and correspondence logs. During his first meeting with Samuel, Meckham outlined the scope of his investigation. "We'll need to review your membership rolls, financial records, correspondence files, and burial registers for the past 5 years. We will also conduct private interviews with at least 50 members," he stated. Samuel's response revealed his growing concern. He tried to suggest a more informal evaluation, hoping to control the process. But Meckham was resolute. "Authentic Shaker practices are universal," he said, emphasizing that standards applied equally to all communities. That evening, the Richardson family convened in private, urgently discussing how to handle the situation. Mother Sarah, despite her frailty, took charge. "This man knows things we can't fake," she whispered. "We need to delay, deflect, or if necessary, eliminate the threat before he completes his investigation." The family realized the severity of their predicament. Isaiah pointed out that the membership numbers would expose them. While their books showed 400 members, only around 250 were actually living there. The burial registers were even worse, with records of supposed departures that never occurred. Hannah added that Meckham had already identified inconsistencies in the correspondence she'd maintained with other communities, and his questions about Shaker teachings showed an alarming depth of knowledge. Their initial attempts to delay and deflect Meckham's investigation only intensified his suspicions. When they claimed that certain records had been damaged in a storm, he noticed the building showed no signs of weather damage. When they suggested specific members to interview, he insisted on random selection from the full membership list. Caleb's surveillance network, effective within the community, proved useless against Meckham, who seemed to intuitively know when he was being watched. His questions during interviews revealed an expertise in Shaker practices that made it clear he was not easily deceived. The Richardson family's control over Pleasant Hill was beginning to unravel, and Meckham's investigation was quickly turning into a serious threat to their empire. The Richardson family's carefully constructed facade began to unravel when some surviving members of the community, influenced by Meckham's authenticity, started responding to his genuine spiritual presence. Sister Mary Caldwell, who had witnessed Brother Thomas Whitman's suspicious death over 2 decades ago, found herself drawn to Meckham's obvious sincerity and began to share her long-suppressed observations about the mysterious disappearances. For the first time in years, community members encountered someone whose spiritual authority didn't rely on fear or manipulation, and the psychological effects of Meckham's presence were immediate and profound. His gentle questions, deep knowledge of authentic Shaker practices, and genuine concern for their spiritual welfare brought long-buried doubts and memories to the surface. Brother Jeremiah Richardson, whose furniture workshops provided crucial income for the family, found his workers increasingly distracted by conversations with Meckham about traditional Shaker craftsmanship techniques they had never been taught. These conversations revealed significant gaps in their knowledge, suggesting they weren't receiving proper instruction in authentic Shaker methods. Meanwhile, Sister Rebecca Richardson's carefully controlled dormitory system began to break down as female members started questioning practices they had never been taught. Her authority, which had been absolute for so long, seemed less certain in comparison to Meckham's apparent authenticity. The investigation took a decisive turn when Meckham requested access to the community cemetery for a private memorial service for departed members. The Richardson family, unable to refuse such a reasonable request, without raising suspicions, reluctantly agreed. However, they hoped to control what Meckham observed, so Brother Caleb volunteered to escort him, limiting his time among the graves. But Meckham's trained eye immediately noticed inconsistencies that had escaped casual observers for decades. The burial patterns didn't match the death dates in official records, and the condition of the grave markers suggested far more interments than the documented deaths could account for. Meckham questioned Caleb, who struggled to respond. "Perhaps there was an error in our record-keeping," Caleb offered. But Meckham remained skeptical, pointing out that Shaker communities typically maintained extremely accurate documentation of deaths and departures. The inconsistencies, he said, suggested systematic problems rather than occasional errors. That night, Meckham made a discovery that would expose the full scope of the Richardson family's crimes. Unable to sleep due to his growing suspicions, he decided to examine the cemetery by moonlight, hoping to reconcile burial records with actual grave sites without the family's supervision. What he found was a graveyard that told two completely different stories. The official cemetery maintained for visitors and inspections contained approximately 40 graves with proper headstones arranged neatly. However, Meckham's trained eye noticed subtle depressions and variations in soil color that indicated many more burials than the headstones suggested. The vegetation patterns revealed disturbed soil, indicating that the ground had been repeatedly altered, and areas of the cemetery showed evidence of additional unmarked graves. More chilling still, when Meckham examined the dated graves, he realized that many of the supposed death dates aligned exactly with his list of members who had allegedly left Pleasant Hill to found new communities or visit distant relatives. These dates formed an impossible timeline. How could someone die and be buried at Pleasant Hill on the same day they were reported to have departed for Ohio or Tennessee? Meckham's systematic examination revealed a pattern of deception so elaborate that it demonstrated years of careful planning. Members who had supposedly died of natural causes were buried alongside those who had supposedly left for missionary work. The dates chronicled a systematic elimination of members, coinciding perfectly with moments when the community faced internal resistance or potential exposure. Meckham's investigation was interrupted by Sister Mary Caldwell, who had been watching from her dormitory window. Recognizing an opportunity to finally reveal the truth she had carried for over 20 years, she moved silently through the night, prepared to expose the full extent of the family's dark secrets. As Mary Caldwell approached Meckham in the moonlight, she carried the desperate courage of someone who knew this might be her only chance to reveal the horrors she had long suppressed. "Elder Meckham," she whispered urgently, "God has sent you to reveal the truth. What you're seeing here is just a small part of what the Richardson family has done to this community." In hushed tones among the gravestones, Mary shared the terrifying reality she had lived with for decades. "I've seen them bury people in the middle of the night," she trembled. "The Richardson family doesn't just control this community. They've been systematically murdering anyone who threatens their power or questions their authority." Mary's testimony painted a chilling picture of a death camp disguised as a religious community. Members who questioned finances, expressed homesickness, or displayed leadership potential were methodically eliminated. "Sister Hannah Collins keeps poisons in the kitchen stores," Mary revealed, her voice trembling. "I've seen her prepare meals for people who were asking too many questions." Mary went on, her words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "Brother Caleb knows who's planning to leave before they even tell anyone. He listens at doors and reads their letters. He has a list of problems and they disappear within days." She revealed the most horrifying truth of all human trafficking. Brother Isaiah's seed business is a cover. He's actually delivering people to buyers in the South. Elder Meckham realized that Pleasant Hill was never a Shaker community at all, but a criminal enterprise that had perverted genuine spiritual seeking into a tool for exploitation and murder. The real Elder Samuel died in 1808. Mary whispered just 1 year after the community was founded. "I remember him. He was gentler, more concerned with our spiritual welfare. The man calling himself Samuel Richardson now is someone else entirely." The weight of Mary's revelations hit Meckham like a blow. Not only had the Richardson family been committing mass murder for over 25 years, but they had also destroyed the original Shaker community at Pleasant Hill. Using religion as a weapon, they manipulated and exploited their followers, erasing the true spiritual purpose of the settlement. As dawn approached, Meckham faced a terrible choice. Confronting the Richardson family directly would likely lead to his own death, and with it the loss of the only outside witness to their crimes. But if he left to seek help, the family might eliminate all remaining witnesses before authorities could intervene. The fate of nearly 250 trapped souls weighed heavily on him. Meckham made the decision to flee Pleasant Hill in the early hours of March 16th, carrying Mary Caldwell with him. They rode through the night to Harrodsburg, where Meckham convinced Sheriff Morrison and a federal marshal to organize a raid on the community. Armed with Mary's testimony and Meckham's documentation of discrepancies, federal authorities were brought in, overriding local jurisdiction. Sheriff Morrison, who had been receiving payments from the Richardson family, was rendered powerless against the federal marshal's legal authority. When the authorities arrived, they found only 37 living members of the community, down from the 250 that had been alive just 3 weeks earlier. Survivors locked in basement storage rooms told stories that revealed the full scope of the Richardson family's crimes. They had been kept without food or water for 2 days, as the family debated whether to kill them all or sell the strongest to distant buyers. The survivors' testimony confirmed that the family had been systematically selling community members into slavery while maintaining the facade of voluntary departures for missionary work. Investigators found hidden burial sites throughout the community's vast property, containing remains that showed signs of poisoning, strangulation, and blunt force trauma. Maps in Brother Jeremiah's workshop indicated the location of every hidden grave. More than 150 unmarked graves were discovered, with many containing multiple bodies, suggesting a coordinated effort to eliminate anyone who posed a threat. Detailed ledgers in the family's private quarters documented the human trafficking operation. The records included buyers' names, prices paid, and descriptions of the people sold. Over the past decade, the operation had generated over $40,000 in profits, far exceeding the family's legitimate business income. Most chilling of all was the discovery of Martha Richardson's personal journal. Written over 15 years, it documented the family's systematic experiments in psychological control and manipulation, providing a chilling look into how they maintained their grip on power. The horrors of Pleasant Hill had finally been exposed, and the Richardson family's reign of terror was over. Martha Richardson's journal revealed chilling insights into the family's ruthless manipulation, showcasing methods that would impress even modern psychologists with their sophistication. There was no remorse in her writing. Instead, she offered clinical observations on which methods were most effective for different personality types. Her entries included detailed plans for expanding the family's operations and how to break down psychological resistance, treating people as resources to exploit rather than individuals deserving of compassion. The journal contained psychological profiles of every community member, assessing their value as workers, their potential for resistance, and their suitability for various types of exploitation. The Richardson family's fate was swift and decisive. They were arrested and charged with multiple crimes, including murder, kidnapping, fraud, and human trafficking. The trial in Frankfurt in the summer of 1834 drew national attention, revealing the full scope of their crimes. The testimony described decades of psychological torture, physical abuse, and systematic murder carried out with the precision of a business operation. The overwhelming evidence led to guilty verdicts on all charges, and all 7 members were sentenced to death. Executions took place in October 1834, witnessed by many former community members who had escaped or been sold into slavery. While the executions provided some measure of justice, they could not restore the lives stolen or heal the trauma left behind. The 37 survivors faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives after years of abuse. Many suffered from what we would now recognize as severe PTSD, unable to trust religious communities or authority figures. Some never recovered, spending their remaining years in state institutions. Others found the strength to rebuild, supported by genuine religious communities, including the Ohio Union of Shaker Communities, which established a fund to help the survivors transition to normal life. This fund provided financial support, job training, and counseling services, helping many survivors find peace and stability. However, the state of Kentucky kept most investigation records sealed, fearing that publicizing the details would harm the region's reputation. The community's buildings were demolished, and the land was sold to private farmers under the pretense that the community had simply disbanded. This secrecy allowed rumors and speculation to replace the truth, and many of the victims' stories were never fully told. Historians estimate that the Richardson family murdered or sold into slavery over 400 people during their 27-year reign. The true number may be higher, as their records focused on profits rather than comprehensive documentation. This story serves as a stark reminder of how easily religious faith can be weaponized by those who understand the psychology of control. The Richardson family thrived for nearly 3 decades by exploiting people's spiritual longings, using religion as a tool for oppression and murder. The isolation they created around their victims made resistance seem impossible. The Pleasant Hill tragedy underscores the importance of maintaining connections between religious communities and the broader society, ensuring that abuse cannot flourish in isolation. What do you think? Do you believe everything has been revealed, or might there be darker secrets still buried in Kentucky's sealed archives? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this tale, subscribe for more horror stories like this. See you in the next video. Thank you everyone for watching the video. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel to watch the next interesting videos.